Hello, all. Jace here. Today, we're going to highlight Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana, going after the liberal thoughts on a variety of different topics on the Senate floor. Thank you guys for watching. Please throw me a sub and a like on the video, and let's get right into it.
And you think that prisoners who do work are underpaid? Is that the ACLU position?
They are underpaid or unpaid. In your state, many of those workers are unpaid.
Okay. Let's take a maintenance worker, which I assume includes people working in the kitchen. What do you think the starting pay ought to be in my state for a prisoner?
Workers should be paid the minimum wage of the state where they live. And there are true fiscal arguments in favor
minimum wage? Is that
minimum wage, yes.
Do you think prisoners should have a 401k?
I think that, my opinion is not what we're asking about. I'm here to provide information and context for the committee.
Do you think prisoners should be provided with a 401k?
If I may answer, the reality is that if we paid incarcerated workers a minimum wage, it would have net fiscal benefits for
yes,
the United States.
I'm trying to ask you
workers would be able to pay.
About benefits.
Yes.
Do you think they should be provided with a 401k?
Workers should be eligible to earn into the social safety net. If they're paid minimum wage, workers will be able to earn into Social Security benefits to support themselves.
No?
That does not include a 401k, okay. But I'm talking about basic social safety net.
Do you think prisoners should be entitled to paid vacation?
Workers should be entitled to workers' compensation when they're injured or maimed on the job, which happens all too often.
So they should be covered under our workers' comp law?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Workers are working in dangerous conditions. Should prisoners be allowed to
unionize?
Yes.
You believe that too? Okay.
It's vital that workers
should prisoners be provided with health insurance, matched by their employer?
Workers should be covered by workplace health and safety guarantees. Incarcerated people.
What about health insurance?
Incarcerated people are already guaranteed a basic standard of health care. That is already guaranteed by U.S. law.
Health insurance.
They're already guaranteed that, even though the medical care they receive is usually substandard, and when they're injured on the job, often receive substandard care. They are already guaranteed by law basic health care protections while incarcerated.
Mr. Wynn, what crime did you commit?
Second-degree murder and attempted second-degree murder.
Okay. Who did you murder?
Jeffrey Owens.
Jeffrey Owen?
Yes, sir.
Why did you murder him?
I was a 16-year-old kid. Me and DeWan had a confrontation, and Jeffrey was an innocent bystander.
Okay. So you shot Jeffrey by accident?
Yes, sir.
You intended to murder somebody else?
I was defending myself against DeWan Lewis.
Okay. Mr. Lewis, you shot at Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
And you missed?
Yes, sir.
And you hit Mr. what was his name?
Mr. Jeffrey Owens.
Mr. Owens? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Did Mr. Owens have a mother?
I think everybody born in the world has a mother.
Yeah. But was his mother alive when you killed him?
She's still alive.
Okay. Did Mr. Owens have a father?
Yes, sir.
Who was alive when you killed him?
I don't know about his father's.
You never checked?
I mean, as a prisoner in Louisiana, you cannot check on those type of things.
Did Mr. Owens have any brothers or sisters?
Yes, he did.
Okay. How many?
I don't know.
Okay. You mentioned that your mother cried when you were sent to Angola. Do you know how Mr. Owens' mother felt? Have you ever reached out to them?
May I ask you a question, Senator?
Well, answer mine first.
I would answer yours.
Okay.
And you asking me questions that an incarcerated person cannot answer. I don't know what Jeffrey Owens' mother did, but human anatomy tells me that, yes, his mother had to cry because she lost a son that she brought into the world. Okay. Yes, his father, if he was living, he should have cried. His brother cried.
Did you ever reach out to Mr. Owens' family?
Sir, you're a senator from Louisiana. If a person like me that was incarcerated reach out to any person that's a victim, That's a sentence. You go to prison for that. And I was already in prison, so that's a different sentence.
So you couldn't
No,
write.
by law, you cannot reach out to the victim or the victim's family.
Well, I will tell you, I came today because I thought we were going to have and I hope we were going to have a rational discussion based on empirical evidence on a very complex, nuanced subject. Frankly, I'm disappointed. You know, Ms. Turner, Professor, I just don't think these emotional arguments are at all productive in us trying to solve a problem. People are in prison for a reason. I believe in free will. I get the impression that the ACLU position and the professor's position, I don't know about Mr. Wynn's position, is that you feel sorry for these folks who are in prison. I wish they weren't there too, but they're there for a reason that really hurt somebody. In Mr. Wynn's case, he murdered somebody. He actually killed somebody by accident. He meant to kill this person and he shot this other person. He could have killed two. And I'm kind of disappointed. And I just don't think we're going to solve this problem with emotional arguments from people who don't believe in free will and responsibility. That's just my point of view. But I thank you all for being here. And I'll say this, Professor, I was struck, Professor Armstrong, you keep talking about coercive context, that the prisoners are working in a coercive context. It's prison. Prison is a coercive context. And people are there for a reason. And I think you're in la-la land if you don't recognize that.
Okay, so clearly this was about, forcing prisoners to work in the amount of pay they receive for the work they perform while they're in prison. The ACLU woman was nuts, but I mean, what else would you expect? I do think it's humorous that she thinks that someone who is incarcerated who gets hurt on the job should get paid for not working through workers' comp while they're injured, which is just amazing to me. And then they brought in a prisoner, and I'm sure to give an emotional plea about how horrific it was to have to do manual labor while they were in prison for murder, which my heart just bleeds. I will say, it costs, on average, a little over $36,000 per inmate per year for them to be incarcerated. I wonder if that cost is being worked into this minimum wage that prisoners should be receiving. If you were to average out the $36,000 it costs for us to pay for a prisoner to be in prison by a 40-hour work week, that means they're making about $17.45 an hour. So when are we offsetting that from this pay that they should be receiving? If it were up to me, I've mentioned this on videos before, I think we should privatize it, make private entities run the prisons and make them profitable, in which case the prisoners would be expected to work and they would get paid nothing. And I think that's more than fair.
Secretary, I thought I understood your proposed budget. I want to walk you through it again. Isn't it a fact that the president's proposed budget increases spending by $500 billion over the current budget?
There is an increase in 24 over 23 by about that much.
Okay.
In outlays.
Isn't it a fact that the president's budget proposes new taxes of $4.7 trillion?
That's probably right, yes.
Okay. And isn't it a fact, I'm talking about gross debt now, not debt held by the public. Isn't it a fact that under the president's proposed budget, gross debt would go from $32.7 trillion at the close of this year to $50.7 trillion by 2033.
Debt subject to statutory limitation, yes, would go, as you said.
So the president's budget would increase our debt by $18 trillion.
Which is $3 trillion less
Right.
than it would increase without the proposals in the president's budget.
So what the president's saying is, these are my words, not his. Because of his budget, we're going to have 3 heart attacks and a stroke instead of 4 heart attacks and a stroke.
Well, I would not agree that we're going to have 3 heart attacks and a stroke because we have a very large economy. And while the numbers that you cite are very big numbers, the size of our economy is also extremely large. And I think a better metric for assessing what the impact of the budget is on our economy and whether or not it's manageable is real net interest on the real net interest payments that we have to make relative to the size of our economy. And those real net interest payments run throughout the 10 years of the budget at around or under 1% of GDP, which is historically normal. So debt is increasing, the size of the economy is increasing, interest rates are moving back toward more normal levels after a period of many years in which they were exceptionally low. And yet, overall, what you see in this budget is real net interest on the debt stabilizing at about 1% of GDP, which is a manageable and historically normal number.
So $51 trillion of debt up from $33 trillion doesn't bother you?
I think the path that is set out in the president's budget is fiscally sustainable.
Okay. Well, how much debt is too much? Tell me that.
Well, I just gave you the metric that I think is best for assessing fiscal sustainability.
Okay. Let me ask it in simpler terms. I didn't follow you there.
It's
What percentage of our GDP, what debt as a percentage of our GDP is too much?
so it depends on what interest rates are. And real interest rates have been extremely low. This budget and previous budgets have projected that they would move up toward more normal levels over time, but certainly not the levels that we saw several decades ago. And
Could you
we
just
can't
answer my
judge-
question, Madam Secretary? What percentage of our debt of our GDP is too much?
Well, this budget has debt held by the public moving up to around 109% of GDP.
And that's not too much, in your opinion?
Historically, it's a high level, but on the other hand, interest rates, real interest rates, have moved down substantially in recent decades. And so higher levels of debt to GDP are sustainable with lower real interest rates. And on balance, as I said, the interest burden of the debt is at a level that is quite reasonable in historic terms.
Madam Secretary, are you a Keynesian?
Well, I don't quite know what you mean by that, but I've certainly
Well,
studied
do you
Keynesian.
believe it's acceptable, indeed, it's admirable for government when you're in a slow period, a recession, or bordering a recession, to stimulate the economy by borrowing money and spending?
It certainly can be. I certainly,
That's
there
what I
are
mean.
different.
That's what I mean by Keynesian. Do you support that?
Well, there are different tools that can be used to stimulate an economy that's in a downturn. And it's monetary policy is an alternative tool. And
But let me go back to my question. Keynes said that when you're in a recession, you can borrow money and spend it, government can, to stimulate the economy and get you out of the recession.
Well, I'm not going to make a blanket statement that I agree with that.
Well, let me ask you if you agree with this. A lot of people who say they're Keynesians, and based on what I've read of your writings, you are a Keynesian.
But
they forget the second part of what Keynes said. He said after you get out of the recession, you pay the money back. Did he not?
I don't recall that he said that.
He said it. I can show you that one too.
Well, show that to me.
I promised the chairman I wouldn't go over, and I want to yield back 2 seconds.
Okay, so that was Janet Yellen. For any of you who don't know, she is the Secretary of the Treasury. She holds America's purse strings. She is supposed to be the best expert we have on budgeting, and this was her argument. And this isn't just a Democrat thing. Republicans do this too, it's just bull. But you heard what she said there. The deficit was going to increase by up to almost $51 trillion, right? But if Biden, if they did nothing to the budget, it would have increased by $54 trillion. So then Biden and all these people, they get on TV and they say, we're proposing our new budget and it's going to save Americans $3 trillion over the next 20 years. That's the grift, and it's ridiculous. They saved us nothing. They cut the deficit by nothing. They only grew it. But because it could have been worse, well, then they saved us $3 trillion. It's an absolute scam. And I want you to hear what she was saying about us taking on all this debt and how she justified it. And let me reiterate, this is the Secretary of the Treasury. And I'm going to break this down on a household level. What she stated there was, if you have a credit card, right, got a $10,000 limit, you got it maxed out. Not only is it okay to maintain that maxed out credit card as long as you can afford the monthly payments, but you should also continue to request credit line increases and continue to max it out according to that credit line increase, as long as you can make the minimum monthly payments. In her brain, that is being fiscally responsible. Not one of you would run your household that way willingly. We pretty much all have to live that way now because none of us can afford to eat. But that's what the Secretary of the Treasury was saying makes good fiscal sense. It's insane. I'm going to do a quick intro on this next clip because we're going to jump in and kind of in the middle. This is Senator Kennedy talking to leaders in the electric vehicle industry about should the government continue to subsidize people purchasing electric vehicles and how much that would cost. This is extremely relevant to all of you because, I know Kamala Harris has flip-flopped on so many things, and she claims that she's moved away from the EV mandates, but up until 5 minutes ago, she's been all about trying to put EV mandates in place, which will force all of us to get rid of our gas cars and buy an electric vehicle.
How many cars do we have in the United States?
280.
This lady right here. In the middle. I'm sorry, if I could see your name, I wouldn't just point to you.
If I could, I'd like to defer to my colleague who has
I'd like
better.
to hear your answer, okay?
How many calls?
How many cars are there?
295 million?
Okay, and what percentage are electric vehicles?
1.6.
Okay, hold up that chart. Here's where all electric vehicles are. California loves them. The West Coast loves them. Everybody else is kind of lukewarm. Okay, I'm trying to understand why. But let me move on to this. Let me ask these two gentlemen. I think the reason is because they're more expensive, and people when they drive a car like it to run, and when it runs out of electricity, it stops, and they can't find a place to charge. So let me ask these two gentlemen. I don't want to be unfair. So it's clear we got a long way to go. We got 283 million cars in America, and we got 3.3 million electric vehicles. We got a long way to go. And at least these three folks think that we need to take taxpayer money and give enough money to American people so they'll walk away from gas cars and drive electric vehicles. How much is that going to cost? I'm going to ask them in a second if I have time. But how much do you think it will cost for us to basically bribe every American to drive an electric car?
Well, Senator, excuse me, Dave Sweeter with the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. I would just underscore your original question with this. There's really two things at play as it relates to what's
happening. How much money do you think it'll cost to bribe the American people enough to make them drive electric cars, to move those numbers?
Electrification's increasing as it relates to cost. Only a fraction of currently eligible vehicles are eligible for the federal tax credit. So,
how much do you think it'll cost, David?
Senator, I think I quoted earlier that...
I'm calling on you, sir.
Apologies.
How much do you think it'll cost?
It ultimately depends on consumer adoption.
You don't know, do you?
We don't have an exact figure.
You think, well, just keep throwing money at it until we hit the jackpot. How about you, Mr. Davis?
Eventually, if you put enough charging stations there to solve for range anxiety, because the reason I didn't buy one is because I may have to drive 450 miles to East Tennessee at spur of the moment.
The American taxpayer, for us to convince the American people, frankly, bribe the American people to get rid of the gas car and drive an electric car. Can any of you give me a figure?
Yes, Senator, the Treasury Department reports we spent about $1 billion year to date. So for the first half of this year, so roughly $2 billion this year.
We're behind.
As I noted,
how much do you think it'll cost, Doctor? You're a doctor,
so
right?
$2 billion this year is what the estimate from the Treasury Department.
How much do you think it will cost for us to, let's say, get 75% of these 200?
How much will it cost American consumers to remain?
How much? Do you know how much it'll cost, Doctor?
No one knows the future with certainty, Senator.
Right. You just think we ought to keep throwing money at it until we hit the jackpot.
I think we ought to set a stable policy framework that allows American consumers to become familiar with the environment and American businesses to innovate and to compete within that stable framework. That's what I said earlier in my testimony.
And how much will that cost?
Will cost less than the benefits delivered by the policy.
You don't care how much it costs, do you?
I care if the benefits exceed the costs. I don't care about the costs. These are investments in the public.
You don't care how much it costs, do you?
I care very much how much it costs. As long as the benefits exceed the costs, that's an investment worth making.
Well, so, okay.
How much does it cost to seed the industries of the future to China?
I get to ask the questions, Doc.
Sorry.
You're at Princeton, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. How are Jewish students doing at Princeton? Are they feeling better?
No, that has nothing to do with the hearing today. I'm not going to comment on that.
I didn't think you'd want to talk about that. Do any of you have any idea how much it would cost
Senator,
to get, say, 75% of the American people
Senator,
driving electric cars?
If I could, your question is fair. One answer to it is the cost of inaction of the U.S. not competing is far greater than any incentive on the front end.
Okay, quantify that for me. Oh, man, I'm way over. I'm sorry, Sheldon. Quantify that for me, because here's
Once you wrap up with this, because I think everybody's had a chance to try to answer your question, and
here's
you're
my
repeating
problem.
it at this point.
Okay, we all want clean air. We all want bright water. We all want to eat, and we all want to live indoors. Okay? But there are trade-offs in all of this. Despite what the Princeton professor thinks, we don't have unlimited money. This is not Princeton. So we have to decide the cost and the benefits. And nobody seems to be able to quantify the costs. They just say, keep throwing money at it, throwing money at it, throwing money at it. And nobody can really quantify the benefits, except if we don't do it, then we're all going to die. And when I go back to my people and say, Your electricity costs have gone up 30%, but it's for a good cause. Why, Kennedy? Because you're going to die if we don't do it. Why, Kennedy? Because a professor at Princeton says so. That doesn't work for most Americans. Can you answer that for me? You see my frustration. I love driving an electric car. I think they're really cool. But the median household income in my state's $55,000. Our Princeton professor probably makes that in a week. Okay? They don't care what they think at Princeton. Can you answer that for me, guys?
Okay, so we're going to put aside the fact that none of this makes any sense. This EV mandate makes no sense. Until we are no longer charging these electric vehicles with electricity generated by the same fossil fuels that they're trying to get away from with gas-powered cars, none of this argument makes any sense. But we're just going to put that aside for right now. This clip ties in perfectly with the Janet Yellin clip, because these are all disciples of this school of modern monetary theory, which basically just states that, or summarizes that, America as a nation is too big to fail. None of our debtors are ever going to call in our loans because they need our interest payments. So, according to the school of modern monetary theory, you can just print and print and print and print more money with nothing to back it. You can just print all the money you want. That is the primary reason that we have the inflation that we do today. We just keep printing it because all of these economists and all of these educated people believe that there are no ramifications. Well, we're seeing, all of us normal people are seeing when we go to the grocery store and when we pay our bills, printing nonstop money has major ramifications because the value of a dollar isn't what it was. So everything costs more. We all make the same, but because a dollar is worth 50 cents, everything costs us twice as much.
There was an opportunity during your exchange with Senator Cruz that you were attempting to offer a response relative to the conditions under which this petitioner was unsafe in the facilities in which she was being held. I'd like to offer you the opportunity to finish that response.
So the facts that were presented to me and what I relied on to make my decision were that the petitioner had engaged in no violence, no physical violence, no acts of sexual violence whatsoever while in custody. All three wardens who supervised the petitioner requested that she be transferred to a women's facility because of her serious medical needs. In addition, the Bureau of Prisons' longtime medical provider testified at a 2-day hearing in my courtroom and recommended that the petitioner be transferred because of her serious medical needs. And the last thing I'll say is that the Transgender Executive Council, which is the body that makes decisions on behalf of transgender transfer requests within the Bureau of Prisons, never said that the petitioner could not be transferred, and never, ever said that she couldn't be transferred because of any risk of violence. What the Transgender Executive Council repeatedly said in denying the request was simply that she needed to maintain her hormone levels. That was the repeated justification for the denial of transfer. But the petitioner had reached full female hormone levels before even being incarcerated. At the time, the district judge in Indiana who sentenced the petitioner requested that she be placed in a women's facility. Her hormones were entirely female at that point, and so the decision by the Transgender Executive Council to deny the transfer request based on this idea that it was only because her hormones needed to be consistent and stabilized, I found was a pretext, but they never once said she cannot be transferred because of violence. It was always based on this idea that her hormones had to be.
Thank you, Judge Jeanette Burns. Senator Padilla.
Judge Jeanette Burns, that's
Senator
directly
Padilla,
contrary to what your
Senator, you
report
all
says.
have
That is
had
directly
no.
contrary. No.
We're going to
You're going to follow up, and that's how it works.
There is not.
That is exactly how it works.
Look,
If you follow up, you didn't get extra time, and she just directly contradicted her own report. I'm just going to read her own words because it's exactly the opposite of what she said. Your own report.
Senators, I gave both of you more time to finish your line of questioning. I allowed the witness to finish her. I allowed the witness to finish her response. I allowed the witness to finish her response. That is,
okay, I understand that you're scared of the facts.
I have
Senator Padilla. Madam Chair, she has an obligation to explain why she directly contradicted what she wrote in her report. She says in her report, the Bureau of Prisons' claimed penological interest is in protecting female prisoners from sexual violence and trauma. She just told you the Bureau of Prisons didn't say there was a concern about sexual violence and trauma. Those are directly contradictory, and why are you contradicting what you wrote in your report?
And what are you trying to hide, Madam Chair? No, wait, point of order.
Senator Padilla. Senator Padilla.
Are you going to let her answer that question?
Senator Padilla.
Or you don't want her to answer that question?
Senator Padilla.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Senator
Afraid of the answer to that
question?
cover-up.
Are you afraid of the answer to that question?
Senator Padilla.
So yes, you are afraid of the answer to that question.
Senator Padilla.
Clearly you're afraid of the answer to that question.
This is absurd.
Okay, I'm going to cut this in the middle, and then we'll let Senator Kennedy finish and end the video. But this, in a nutshell, is all of the judges there are being questioned because they're seeking federal seats. Basically, they're trying to get promotions and be federal judges. This particular woman, the Senators Kennedy and Cruz cross-examined her on a brief that she wrote on one of her rulings. After they were done, she turns around and tells the committee something entirely different. So they want to question her on what she just said because it completely contradicted the brief. And of course, the liberals running the committee, who are going to vote all of them through anyway, this is really an exercise in futility, but they won't even let them do that. It just shows how corrupt our systems are. Everybody does party line voting, and none of it really matters anyway. But I'm going to let Senator Kennedy close out this episode because he can do it way better than me. Thank you, guys.
I have a point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator Kennedy.
Madam Chair, with respect, you allowed the witness to go at length and to change her testimony without her being subject to cross-examination. Are you going to allow us to have a second round of questioning?
No, Senator Kennedy.
What are you trying to cover up here?
There is no cover-up, and Mr. Padilla, Senator Padilla, you'll be allowed the 30 seconds remaining left.
I want to appeal the ruling of the chair.
Thank you. I'd like to hear the
I would like to
responses
appeal.
from the two
Madam
witnesses
Chair, I have a point of order. I'd like to appeal the ruling of the chair. You allowed
Your point of order was offered and responded to,
and I appeal the ruling of the chair and call for a roll call vote. You allowed a witness, let me state my case.
Sure.
With respect. You allowed a witness to go on for 4 or 5 minutes, change her testimony, knowing full well that neither Senator Cruz nor I could cross-examine her about her perjury.
Senator Kennedy, would you allow the witnesses to finish responding to my question, and then we can act on your request?
And I think
Senator
we should
Kennedy.
have a second round.
Senator Kennedy.
And I am appealing the ruling of the chair.
Senator Kennedy, would you allow the witnesses to finish responding to my question, and then we can respond to your request?
The ruling of the chair.
Senator Kennedy, I gave you a response to your request of a second round of questioning. I have no intention on allowing a second round of questioning.
And I'm appealing your ruling.
That is fine. There is no procedure that allows for a roll call. There is no procedure for it that allows for a roll call vote in this committee. This is a hearing. I have the gavel. I have responded to your request.
This is
and I am going to return
I will
to
say I've never
Senator
seen
Kennedy's.
a chair try so hard to protect a witness witness and avoid answering why she just lied on the stand with her own words, her own opinion.
Thank you so much for your request. It has been heard, responded to. Senator Padilla,
There will be no cross-examination. The witness shall be allowed to lie, and no one will ask her.
Ruling. I think I have the floor.
You asked for, was there going to be another round of questions?
Point of order. Your
the answer
ruling
is no.
That we can't have a second round, that the chair can allow a witness, after we're finished with cross-examination, go on at length, change her testimony, potentially perjure herself. We're not allowed to cross-examine in a second round of questioning, which we do all the time.
The answer is no,
you tell
Senator
me
Kennedy.
I can't, and you now ask for a roll call vote to appeal your ruling.
Madam
and you
Chair,
say I can do that.
no, you cannot.